developer can make a fair return, we can negotiate what a fair return is, and still build housing at levels that are affordable for more of our community. Which means, I'm all for inclusionary zoning and requirements and expectations of mixed income, but with that need to be the financial incentives that actually make the math work. And really that comes down to either land or financing. And those are both levers that can be played to lower the cost of development along with making it easier to build. And I think then there are a lot of creative hybrid models. We need more of all of it. We need supportive housing, we need student housing here, we need a lot of affordable rental. And as Jennifer rightly said, we need home ownership as well in the mix. Not everyone should be homeowners, but historically when we look at a society that has become full of either people with assets who are doing great financially and people without assets who are struggling, you know that the K economy is very real in all the data. And the biggest delta when you look at the wealth gap are whether families had the opportunity to create long-term savings over time through home ownership. So home ownership in many ways is a pathway. It shouldn't be primarily a financial investment. It should be for a safe, stable place to live. But those long-term savings have created intergenerational assets for families that then allow them to help their children with down payments, to help their children with college tuitions, and to lever them up into the middle class, which we all want for our families. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think there are real answers, but in many ways, it's going to be less about solving the math just with other people's money and more about the willpower in many ways, all of you and all of your neighbors to say yes to new ways of thinking about housing so that Chapel Hill can be, Orange County can be, and North Carolina can be a place that continues to be welcoming, that continues to grow. Growth is actually a really good thing, and that continues to be a place that everyone can participate in the incredible strength of this region. I'm amazed when I was a little kid at what Chapel Hill and the Triangle have become in the last 50 years. But one of the downsides of that is it's no longer a place that everybody can afford to live. And so together I hope we can change it, and I look forward to the conversation. Jennifer, are you introducing Representative?
Yes.
So
yep.
I look forward to solving this with all of you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, it is now my privilege to introduce actually another born and bred Tar Heel, Representative Alan Buansi of North Carolina's 56th House, 56th, that's hard to say, House District. A dedicated advocate for affordable housing and equitable communities, Representative Buansi has worked to support policies that increase housing access, protect renters, and promote neighborhood inclusivity. His background as a civil rights attorney and former Chapel Hill Town Council member informs his commitment to creating stable, affordable housing opportunities for all North Carolinians. In fact, one of the consequential votes that he took when he was a member of the Chapel Hill Town Council was to approve the Weavers Grove development. Unanimously, that passed, I might add. So please join me in welcoming Representative Buansi as he shares his feedback.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I first off want to express gratitude. I want to express gratitude to Jennifer Player for her leadership. Let's give her a round of applause. I also want to express gratitude for the folks here who have been supporting Habitat and its mission to provide affordable housing to some of our most vulnerable in our community, and even outside our community. You know, I want to just say a quick personal note. So everyone has a housing story. Everyone has a housing story, whether it's your first house, your first apartment, or your first room. We've got 11.2 million souls in North Carolina, and we are the third fastest growing state in the union. And so each of those souls has a housing story. And the housing story is not just about finding and getting that home. It's also about the struggle. And I think back to my own childhood. I was bred in Chapel Hill. I wasn't born here. But I remember when my mom moved us to Chapel Hill, she struggled to find us some housing. And so in the first year that we lived in Chapel Hill, we had to rent a room until she could find an apartment that was big enough or bigger enough for the two of us. And, you know, she was a student at UNC. She was a grad student, doing the best that she could. But there are other folks in our community that were struggling and continue to struggle. Folks who work as custodians, folks who have to have multiple jobs with fixed incomes just to put food on the table for their families and for themselves. And so the folks who are making, you know, less than the air median income of $126,000, the folks who are making 80%, 60%, 30% of that, we need to be very intentional about creating those opportunities for housing for them. And I appreciate what Jonathan said. It's important that we are intentional in providing a mix of housing options for folks. Some folks will want to and need to own a home. That's a big part of wealth generation. That's a big part of generating wealth and also passing it on to the next generation of folks. Some folks will want to rent, and we need to have options for them as well. And so, from the state level, in my view, there's so much more that we can be doing as a state to support the good work that Habitat is doing, but also the good work that many of our other organizations and nonprofits around North Carolina are doing. When it comes to the North Carolina Housing Trust funds, making sure that there's funding available to support public-private partnerships, to support developers, in ensuring that we've got subsidized units in as many housing communities as possible. There are things that we can do from a policy standpoint. Appreciate Jonathan mentioning about parking minimums. I know that a lot of states are also trying to make it easier to get projects that have affordable housing integrated into them expedited, so that we can get people into those homes sooner than later. And so I'll just end with this. Your housing story, my housing story, anyone's housing story is a personal story. But the thing that we should all be about is making sure that folks in this state, in our community, are not struggling to get housing. Because everyone deserves a home, everyone. Whether you got a job, whether you're a veteran, or even whether you have a family, you deserve to have a home. Because that is foundational to leading a successful life. Thank you, and I look forward to the session.
It is truly an honor to introduce the University of North Carolina's 12th Chancellor, Lee Roberts. Chancellor Roberts has worked extensively in the private sector, including leadership roles in finance and real estate, giving him a unique perspective on the intersection of economic growth, public policy, and community well-being. As many of you have heard recently, Chancellor Roberts has also championed the long-term vision for Carolina North, positioning it as a future hub for innovation, research, and community collaboration. Important for our conversation today, the Chancellor also has a special emphasis on addressing housing affordability and supporting local families with this reimagined development. So let's give a warm welcome to Chancellor Lee Roberts.
Jennifer, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks very much to the sponsors, to Cisco, which is led by a loyal Carolina alum named Chuck Robbins. Thanks to South State Bank and to the Triangle Community Foundation. I see Lori here. And thank you to Anna and to Jennifer. Thank you to Jonathan, who is not only an alum and grew up here in Chapel Hill, but I learned is the child of a 40-year faculty member, is that right, in Carolina. And I don't know how many people our age can say that our grandmothers served together in Congress, but I think it's a pretty short list of Americans who can say that. And thank you to Representative Buansi, who's been such a strong supporter of both Chapel Hill and of the university. So if you think about all of the people that the university brings to Chapel Hill and all of their incredibly differing and diverse housing needs, we're bringing in undergraduate students of widely varying means. And they're going to be here for 4 years on average. And 100% of them will live on campus freshman year by our policy. About 70% will live on campus, 60 to 70% sophomore year. Only about 30% will live on campus junior year, and only about 10% on campus senior year. And if they're not living on campus, they're living in the town of Chapel Hill by and large. We have graduate students and junior faculty members who are on average going to be here longer, but they don't know in most cases exactly how long they're going to be here, and they don't make very much money. And so that presents a different set of housing considerations. Generally, graduate students don't have parents supporting them, paying their rent, and they're trying to figure out an option for some open-ended period of time. We have tenured faculty members who are trying to put down roots and own a home and raise a family as close to the university as they can. And we have our staff, our 10,000 staff, which runs an incredibly wide gamut from relatively highly paid hospital administrators, vice chancellors, vice provosts, to the people who are serving food in the dining halls and cleaning the dorms, our campus police, all of our facilities people. Whenever I talk to them, which is most days, I ask them where they drive in from, and the answer is usually somewhere in Alamance County or in the far reaches of Chatham County, Siler City. And that obviously makes their lives more difficult and makes Carolina a less attractive place to work. So we have a wide range of challenges housing all of the people who Carolina is bringing to this area. And on top of that, we're growing. We've announced that we want to have 5,000 more undergraduate students over the next 10 years. And we have 500 more students in the current freshman class. We think it's the largest class in the university's history. That means 2,000 more students just over the next 4 years, even if we don't do anything else. And some people have said, well, why are you growing? Why can't the university just stay the same size that it is right now? Isn't it big enough? And the answer is the state is growing dramatically, as Representative Buansi said. We're the third fastest growing state behind only Texas and Florida. We added 145,000 people in the state just in 2025. Just think about the housing required for those incremental 145,000 people. But we have a responsibility as the state's flagship university. We were founded to serve the state, to reflect the state as it changes and grows. We used to enroll about 5% of North Carolina's graduating high school seniors. Now we enroll about 3.5%. And that number is going to continue to drop every year as the state explodes and we stay relatively flat. At some point, we're not fulfilling our mission of service to the state if we don't try to reflect the explosive growth that we see all around us. A lot of universities face these same challenges where the town in which they're situated is relatively unaffordable and getting less so all the time. And they are trying to increase their enrollment. Most universities can't do anything about that. They're landlocked. We have a huge advantage here in Carolina, which is the Carolina North property, which Jennifer mentioned. It's 800 acres, most of you know where it is on MLK. And we believe that we have not just the opportunity, but the responsibility to use that land, which after all is owned by the people of North Carolina, to help address these challenges. The challenge of the lack of affordable housing in the town of Chapel Hill, and the challenge of supporting the growth of the university. There's a third challenge as well, which is the changing mix of what our students want to study. So we used to be about a third between social sciences, humanities, and STEM majors in our undergraduate college. Now we're half STEM majors, and that's without having an engineering school. Biology is our fastest growing major. It's the second most popular major overall now at Carolina. You can teach English in the same classroom for 100 years, and we do. But you cannot do that with biology. You need to invest in modern lab facilities and keep them updated. So that's why we believe we have a responsibility to build out the Carolina North project. Some people have said, why now? What's the catalyst? And our answer to that has been, what has taken so long? The airport has been shut for years. The first planning around Carolina North took place 20 years ago. So we announced a couple of weeks ago before the trustees meeting that we're putting out an RFQ for a master developer. That goes out on Monday. And we intend to build a full-blown campus at Carolina North. The first phase will include 2,200 student beds. And we envision a live, work, play, learn, research campus with lab space, classroom space, office space, and plenty of housing, not just for our own students and graduate students, but for the working families of the town of Chapel Hill, most of whom have some connection to the university one way or another. It's in our enlightened self-interest to provide that housing and add to the supply. The town already has the first tranche of federal funding to run bus rapid transit back down MLK to Franklin Street, and that line turns onto Columbia and comes down into the medical center. It will dramatically improve the connectivity between our campus and Franklin Street and Carolina North. We'll set up a stakeholder advisory group. We intend to have broad representation from our students, our faculty, our staff, and from the town. One of the three co-chairs is a faculty co-chair, a trustee co-chair, and a representative of the town. The representative of the town is Aaron Nelson, who is here. He's the head of the chamber, loyal Carolina alum, former student body president. And so we want the stakeholder advisory committee to be a standing body that provides as much input and feedback as possible. We want to make sure we're getting as many people around the table as we can to help ensure that this resource, which again belongs to everybody, is built out in the most effective way possible. The trails of the forest there aren't going anywhere. The forest is a tremendous treasure, not just for the town, but for the entire Triangle region. And our plan for those 250 acres does not affect the forest or the trail network. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you again to everybody for your support of affordable housing in Chapel Hill and in Orange County, which is really, in my view, and I think the view of all of you, the key to building a better future for our university, for our region, and for our state. Thank you all very much.
So let's get to a little discussion. It's my pleasure now to introduce Leoneda Inge. Some of you might not know her face, but you know her voice. She is a renowned journalist and the race and Southern culture reporter for WUNC, North Carolina Public Radio. As co-host of Due South, Leoneda is widely recognized for her insightful reporting on issues of equity, community, and the lived experiences of North Carolinians. Her thoughtful storytelling elevates important conversations and connects diverse perspectives across our state. Please join me in welcoming Leoneda Inge as she moderates today's discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My show's at noon, this is early. And I actually don't have too many questions for these gentlemen. I think they laid out their plans. They're very clear. They know who they want to work with. And hopefully they know who's going to pay for their loans. And make friends really fast. I actually moved to North Carolina almost 25 years ago. And I was in, actually I was in grad school, I was a public radio reporter in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And there's a woman in the room, I think I saw Joan Seifert Rose here. She was at Michigan Radio, and I remember in my interview, they were like, well, you like Chapel Hill much better than Ann Arbor. And I said, yeah, I gotta get out of Ann Arbor, I can't afford to live here. You know, I have to leave. And then when I got to Chapel Hill, I was like, oh, I can't live in Chapel Hill either. So actually, I'm the only person on this stage that's never lived in Orange County or Chapel Hill. Because when I arrived here, the writing was on the wall, and that was 25 years ago. And I remember telling my daddy, I said, wow, I think they're building some new homes across the street called Meadowmont. I was like, maybe I can live over there. But then, as you see, as you drove in, I've never gotten a chance to do that. To start our conversation, and it'll be, short, because I know everyone has to go to work and move on with their schedules. But Jonathan, I didn't confirm I can call you all by your first name. I usually do that with the people that I speak with. But Jonathan, I wanted to, in your years with Habitat for Humanity International, I just got this feel, and I know your job has gotten so much harder. And I wonder, because I can't imagine it getting easier. So I wonder about the supply chain that you spoke about, because without that, you can't even do your job. And I wonder, what are you hoping to do about that supply chain, and how are you using your voice and your presence, I guess, and your lobbying efforts?
Well, we certainly need voice. How many of you volunteer with Habitat on our build site? See, that's awesome. So we love your muscles, but a not so secret part of Habitat, though I'm sure there's some super high skilled construction workers in the room, is that we really need your voices. And the reason we engage nearly 1 million volunteers a year is not because that's the fastest way to build housing, but it's about how do we actually change hearts and minds so that we can start to influence markets and systems and make them work better. And I think the good news is there is a lot of innovation. If you think about how housing is built, it's actually not changed very much in the last 100 years compared to other industries that have transformed in that time. But now there's a lot of interesting innovations starting to happen in both building materials and in construction technology, and we are testing all kinds of things. We are one of the first investors in a 3D printed house company in India that's now going to come to the US. We are working with all kinds of modular builders who are coming up with different approaches and thinking about it. The quality of building materials, the energy efficiency of building materials has increased dramatically. And if you think about it, if we can lower the utility costs, we were actually a leader in bringing energy efficiency to the low end of the market because we felt our families actually need the energy savings if you think about the total cost of lifetime cycle of housing. So I do think there's some pretty exciting innovation on the product side, and a lot of the conversations there, how do we get those products to scale so you can get down the cost curve so that you can mainstream them in a way that really works. Land, sadly, is the one area that doesn't grow, and so appreciated what Chancellor Roberts said because, but there I think how we use land, in a way there's actually enough square footage of housing, but it's misallocated. So what we have is a lot of older folks living in way too much housing and a lot of young people not having enough housing. So I think we need to think about principles in some ways of new urbanism, less square foot per person, more common area and shared space, and thinking a little bit differently, which also addresses the other giant crisis of loneliness in our society, and reorient the way we think about community building in a way that reconnects people. So I think there are places to go there. I think if you
What
think
about this tiny house movement? You like those tiny houses?
So yes, I like everything, but it's not a magic bullet. Actually, a tiny house is quite expensive per square foot. But one of the really promising policy things is our accessory dwelling units. It's a way to get soft density into communities of opportunity and actually it can solve one of those issues. So if you can allow accessory dwelling units, you might have a woman living in her family's long-term house, her kids are grown, she may be all alone in way too much house, but doesn't want to leave her community or neighborhood. If you actually can build an accessory dwelling unit, she can move into the accessory dwelling unit, rent out her house to a family, and therefore keep her house in the family long term, but also create more housing opportunity and better allocation of all that square footage. And so I think my view is absolutely yes and totally insufficient. So it's one of a whole array of things we probably need.
Oh, what are we gonna do? Lee, so are gonna be tiny houses in Carolina North? I just wanna know, can you tell us at all about maybe the percentage that will be housing? I mean, I know undergraduate housing, graduate housing, and I know undergraduate housing and graduate housing is not cheap housing. I mean, a lot of times when students are looking for a place to stay in the community where they go to schools, because they say, I can't afford to even, it's not just there's not enough housing, but just the package of housing and living on campus. So I wonder how much, did you also mention young faculty and staff, how much of this would you say would be affordable?
So we envision a broad mix, which, as was mentioned before, is, I think most people agree, the key to a really successful, vibrant community is to have a range. I don't really envision much, if any, detached single-family housing. I think we envision student housing, both graduate and undergraduate housing, as well as apartments, but then also townhome housing. The short answer to the exact mix is we haven't gotten that far. As I mentioned, we're just seeking the master developer now, but we're committed to both a capital A affordable component as well as a wide range of workforce and market rate housing. This is not going to be some gated community with attached single family homes. It's going to be fairly dense. I should add that the other component that sometimes gets overlooked is what are we doing to address the housing needs on campus, which is also part of our plans. So we're about to break ground on the first dorm being built in the historic core of the campus in a generation. It's 720 beds, where the admissions office is now going back there to the tennis courts. We're demolishing Parker and Teague dorms that are across from the football stadium, putting more density there. So it's not as though we're expecting Carolina North to address all of our housing needs. We need to densify on the existing campus as well.
I do remember some of my first years here when students at Carolina were doubling up or tripling up to live in dorm rooms. And that was a wild time. Alan, so you've moved on from town council, now you're in the big house of Raleigh. And I wonder, have you found it difficult to continue, some of your views and policies that you want passed or even looked at and considered when it comes to affordable housing? Like, how hard is your job now?
To be honest, it is really, really challenging right now. And Jonathan made the point earlier that housing has become politicized. And so one level of struggle presently is around the fact that we don't have a budget. We're the only state now that does not have a budget. And with the budget comes all kinds of things. I mentioned earlier the North Carolina Housing Trust funds. The funding comes through a state budget. There's also the things that the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency can do, like administer the workforce home loan program. And right now, that's essentially the funding for that is running out, or has run out. And I think in the last budget, there was about maybe $7 million allocated for that program. This is a program to essentially help out particularly rural parts of the state, like rural parts of Orange County, Alamance County, and other counties, when it comes to leveraging and helping public-private partnerships to develop housing for folks in need. And so, essentially, you've got two kind of dueling budget proposals between the House and Senate. I believe the Senate version essentially zeroes out funding for that program. And so it is a struggle to have meaningful conversations and meaningful movement on affordable housing
Well, what are you gonna do? What's more important than affordable housing, food, healthcare?
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? I mean, we have to continue to press the issue. We have to continue
Or
to.
we can just vote.
You said
That helps.
That helps too.
If I can add, there's a huge rural housing issue as well, and I think that's an area where we can start bringing people together, and sometimes it's been urban versus rural, but we're seeing Republican states, red states, doing statewide housing reform and change right now, and it's interesting using a variety of levers, but Montana, Utah, Texas, places you wouldn't necessarily expect. Georgia's trying to do it, and they're realizing that they ultimately, back to the opening comments, they can't hire workers because they don't have housing. And so I think it is, in a way, becomes an imperative, but it's, none of that makes your job easy.
Yeah, I mean, and the point is, we all, and we all in this room, of course, but we all in the General Assembly need to realize that there's an imperative. The folks that we represent, especially in our more rural districts, like they need this stuff. They need it badly. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to realize that. And like you said, ultimately, if there are folks that are not realizing that, you know, there are these things called elections. And so, you know, we need to be pressing this at all levels, not just within General Assembly, but also when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to constituents, and reaching out and what they say, what they communicate to their representatives about what's important, what they ought to be addressing.
You know, Leoneda, one thing I'd add about that, I think the good news politically is, I think the politics have actually shifted pretty dramatically around affordable housing, both here and nationally. There was an article.
Because all parties want their kids out of the basement.
Exactly. And it's not okay anymore, I think. You really don't hear as part of the debate, at least out loud, anybody say, we just don't want more people living in our town. Sometimes people say, we don't want more housing here, and what they really mean is, we don't want more generally. But at least the debate has shifted enough that you don't hear that as part of the debate as much anymore. There was a big article in the New York Times recently about a woman in one of those counties north of San Francisco who's been fighting the same apartment project at the end of her road for 20 years. And she has all of these headlines, all these news clippings from when she first started. She was a hero. She was a local hero fighting the developers. And she's still fighting the same project. She hasn't changed. But the public tide has completely turned against her. And now she's a NIMBY who's standing in the way of affordability in the town. And to Jonathan's point about how long it took to get the Habitat project permitted and entitled here in Orange County, I don't think it would take 18 years if you were starting now. I think that the politics have shifted fairly decisively. That's a good thing.
If I may, I'll just add one other thing, but, you know, from a policy perspective, I mean, I do see a little bit of